So finally we get to the PS3. I want to start off with a comment I had on my channel with the video of how I got into gaming, which talks a bit about how I got my first PS3, which was a Slim. And the comment is from someone named Mike Schotter. And he says, I remember the days of the PS3 Slim. I had worked all summer for 2 months, saving up for it, and a big 1080p TV. Never have I had as much fun gaming as I did with my PS3. Now, that's a wonderful memory to have. I can just imagine him scrimping and saving to get that PS3. That's really what gaming is about, the anticipation and then getting the games and playing them, determined you're gonna have a lot of fun and enjoyment out of that console. That's the approach I go for. So let's look at the launch of the PS3. I'll just start out with a few facts and figures to get us going. So the PS3 launched in Japan on November the 11th, 2006, November the 17th in North America, with a delay of a few months in Europe and Australia in March 2007. While the so-called launch title lists you may find anywhere online tend to be rather long, I've seen anything from 14 to 28 games. In fact, the true PlayStation 3 exclusives are very few and far between, so I'm concentrating only on those, and certainly not on games that were published many months later after launch, or that were somehow ports or cross-platform. I'm just looking at pure PS3 titles, and mercifully we don't have many to go through. Kaz Hirai, who was at the time president and CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment of America, said, I quote, "We are pioneering a new era of true next-generation gaming through such titles as Resistance: Fall of Man, a visually arresting game that takes advantage of the large storage capacity and exceptional visual clarity offered by Blu-ray disc." And that was, of course, the big thing, that the PlayStation 3 had a Blu-ray, one of the first electronic devices to have Blu-ray. So here we are, Resistance. This is the European release, and I only acquired this fairly recently. The reason is, of course, that I don't really play shooters, but if I do, I would favour third person. I think I've only played Resistance maybe once, one of the titles on the Vita. I think there's a Vita one and a PSP one, so I would have played a bit of one of those. And what I liked was the setting, the alternate history setting. That sort of appeals to me. So I decided, for the sake of my collection, that I should have it because it's a launch game and it's considered important for the PlayStation 3. And rather than getting individual games, I thought, well, it's not particularly valuable, it's not rare, the Resistance games, so I decided to get it in a box, just to have something slightly different, really. And that's all it is, it's just a box. As you can see, there's nothing else in there apart from the 3 games. And yes, I will have a play of at least one of the games, because as you know, I'm not a collector for the sake of collecting. I get games because I want to play them and have them in my collection. Now, Resistance was developed by Insomniac Games. The game is set in an alternate history, 1951. So Resistance was the big launch game. It was well received by the critics. A big shooter. I suppose you can't go wrong with that. Now we come to the interesting case of Dark Kingdom. And it is the third game in the Untold Legends series. It was developed and published by Sony themselves. It was a complete and utter flop. I only purchased a copy fairly recently, like last year, because I decided it should be in my collection. It is an RPG, so I did want to have a look at it. The critics refer to it as a wholly forgettable dungeon crawler, a super mediocre title that did nothing to enhance the launch of the PS3, derivative innovation bereft gameplay. Yes, it did not fare well. Now, the information on the back cover says it is a fun online multiplayer game. Obviously, I can't test that anymore. Epic storyline, co-op and internet modes, next-gen HD graphics, and all-new action RPG combat. Well, it obviously wasn't seen like that by either critics or players. So let's have a look at Dark Kingdom and see how bad it really is. I'm going with the normal setting for the game. And here is the character class we can choose. When I played it previously, I chose this warrior with the big hammer. I like big hammers, but he was quite clunky and a bit slow moving. So I thought this time round I would choose the scout. She should be a lot more nimble, I reckon. There's also a mage, but I don't often play a mage. I don't seem to be very good at that. So I'll go with a scout. And look at that character naming, those fields. Couldn't they have upgraded that for the PS3? That looks like PS2 era to me. In fact, the whole game, if you look at the graphics and the style and the way the characters move, it is very, very reminiscent of the PS2 era.
An ancient land of untold legend.
And I'm thinking maybe that was one of the reasons why the critics didn't like it, because for a PS3 launch game, maybe they expected something different, new. So here's the loading screen for Dark Kingdom. We're going into the barbarian lands, and this will serve as the tutorial and prologue.
Spread out. Find the barbarian chieftain.
Oh yeah, well, there's a pious hope.
Straight away. As you command, sir.
With pleasure.
So a bit of intro, and straight away it opens into a cutscene kind of tutorial. There we go. So I need to slay 10 barbarians, and there we go. But you know, they're pesky, they just keep coming back, and that is certainly one of the hallmarks of this game, that you're constantly surrounded by a bevy of enemies, and fresh ones are always available. So here's our first level up. Let's have a look. Oh, I see 2 points available, so you can bolster yourself a little bit. The game is actually quite good. at constantly providing you with ways of leveling up your stats, your skills, and your equipment. You'll see that in the rest of the recording as well. So a typical RPG in that sense. But also, as you can see from the interface there, from the menu, it's pretty simple and straightforward. You don't need to be an RPG specialist to be able to jump into this game.
Use your special attack.
Oh, there are some barrels there. We do like exploding barrels. Boom! That took care of that problem very nicely. So here's the first save point, and wouldn't you know it, they won't let you save. You're not safe on the save point. You first got to get rid of all the enemies. I do seem to like picking up and throwing stuff around in these games. Save points are really plentiful, so it's very easy to not lose any progress accidentally. Now here you see that I have to run around and pick up these orbs, and these orbs are important. I wish they'd been able to do it so that they were just automatically sort of sucked in. It's a bit of a nuisance. Here's the dodging maneuver, and look at that. That looks really cool, I think. That is the coolest move in the game. Oh, now it's getting a bit more serious. Well, the guy would be wearing antlers, wouldn't he? So we need to help the damsel in distress. And that's a useful spell my character has. And we quickly dispatch them. And now come the antler guys. They're a bit more HP heavy, but with my fancy move, I get rid of them quite quickly. Last one, focused strike. She says, "Thank you," and then she runs off. That's all the thanks we get. But at least there's some loot and a nice treasure box. Oh, here come more guys. Yep, there's more trouble. First, let's spec up the equipment a little bit. Yeah, the boots we picked up, very nice, and a rune. And here we go, on to the next set of enemies. There's no point in lighting up those barrels, really. It's just one guy. So from here on, it's actually quite a long way. Obviously, I want to get that nice box there. And you see how they all drop in saying, "No, you're not getting that loot box." And I'm like, I want that loot box. And as you can see, the difficulty level on normal is pretty easygoing. It would have to be for single player because of the number of random enemies they throw at you. So what did we get? And this is nice, you can top up on health, but no, a whole pack of wolves comes in. These points seem to be magnets for enemies. You will recall that I read out from the back of the game that this was designed really as a multiplayer co-op experience, and it becomes pretty clear watching it that it's quite repetitive, dispatching all these enemies. There's only so many moves you have, and the pace of events would certainly be a lot faster and probably a lot more enjoyable if you could, deal with the enemies as a whole group and just sort of mow through them really quickly. So this is now quite funny. It says you can jump over those stones. Should be simple enough, I thought. Well, have a look at that. Ooh, that circle button for jumping. Hey, it took me, and then I got stuck behind the boulders, would you believe it? That was a right old to-do. So finally I made it. Another thing about the combat is that because of the effects and the flashing and lights, and especially if you're in a large group of enemies, you can't actually see what you're doing or where exactly you are or where you're hitting. So I wouldn't call it the most precise hack and slash game that I've ever played. And I've played a few because I do like hack and slash. Yes, another box. And this is a nice one because I get an orb. And as you can see, that provides ice damage. But I have to choose. At this stage, I only get one slot for an orb. So I'll try out the ice one. Now, they mean business, and there's a lot of them, and I'm thinking, ooh, what can I do? The barrels. For once, the barrels are well situated, and I'm just hoping... Yeah, they did a nice job. Now, these barbarian champions are obviously a bit heavier build, but nothing that we can't slash through. And I think this might be the final area. Yeah, I'm massing all the soldiers behind me. And here you see what you can buy with the essence. But in fact, if you look closely at the stats, I get better effect from the equipment that I pick up as loot or enemy droppings. So the essence is not that useful, I find.
The legendary Dragon's Shade sent you all the way here just to quell my little uprising. The reports must be true. The king has gone mad.
The only madman is yourself, savage.
Better I die today than be fed to the dark power that consumes your master.
Then die today.
Don't you love the dialogue? Die today. Super cheesy. So the chief is actually... I thought he would be more difficult, but it wasn't too bad whittling away his HP quite quickly.
Tell me what you know, barbarian, and mayhap your life be spared. Durith has fallen into darkness. Your king has found...
And I don't know about you, but this reminds me so much of the Two Towers from Lord of the Rings. So we're reaching the palace docks, trying to get to the king, and the choices they are facing are pretty tough ones.
If this be true, and we must slay the king to save Durith, then so be it.
And here's the inevitable worm-tongue evil advisor.
See the king, Mordrin, not deal with his lackey.
Yes, of course, Commander. Please, follow me to the courtyard. It's good that you've returned. There is much work to be done, and your soldiers will prove most...
So you confess to plotting against the throne. Then your death warrant is signed.
It is with a heavy heart I lift my hand against you. Soldiers!
So I wonder what your impressions are so far. Would you want to play a game like this nowadays? Probably not, but I wouldn't say it's a bad game, it's just all very standard fare. There's probably nothing there you haven't seen before, and it's all in a fairly streamlined, easy to manage style. I would say, with a few friends on a Friday night, you could have a couple of hours of great fun with this and really romp through the story and quickly get through the missions. And we got to dispatch more soldiers. The mission was obviously escape the palace. And here's the final mission to enable us to escape. I just love walking around with barrels and throwing them. It's just something a bit different. Yep. Get rid of the enemies and order all the soldiers. Yeah, that chest was hidden around the corner, and wouldn't you know it, someone is trying to attack me from behind. You're not getting my loot. And that was a tabard, which is quite nice. So finally, we thought we were ready for the airship, and look at this guy. Oh, he is a nasty creature. And I noticed straight away that he is a different caliber. He hits really hard, and another couple of strikes from him and I think I'd be dead. In fact, I think I did actually die once and had to repeat this. Now this is a really, really sad moment. Look what he does to our much revered Knight Father.
Go. Find the Black Fangs.
The final promise.
Swear to me. Swear you will bring this madman down and restore our kingdom.
They will suffer greatly for this.
And that is what I have time for to show you. There come the airships. The criticism of Dark Kingdom was particularly harsh, I think. What do you think? Does it deserve it? And that brings us to the very last game that I think was a true exclusive to the PlayStation 3 at launch, and that I happen to have. If you know of any other game that was there at launch in November 2006 or March 2007 in Europe at launch, and was a true PS3 exclusive at the time, if you know of one, please let me know. But I present to you Genji, Days of the Blade. Unfortunately, this was another disaster in an area where Sony really should have been shining brightly with 1,000 lights. Developed by Game Republic, this is the sequel to the PS2 game Genji, Dawn of the Samurai. It is a third-person action-adventure game, so it's not an RPG, and takes place in ancient Japan. The back cover says, "The legend of the warrior who founded an empire. The year is 1187, and the scattered Heishi clan are gathering their forces. As their warriors lay waste to temples and villages, Genkuro Yoshitsune must draw his Genji samurai around him and begin the brutal battle to secure the survival of ancient Japan." master the ancient art of the sword, switch between 4 different warriors, and wreak havoc with their unique combat styles, and that's the big thing about the gameplay in Genji. And there is a special Kamui combat system for devastating move sequences. I'll show you just a little bit. And here we have the much ridiculed Genji by Japan Studio and Game Republic. Please enjoy the introductory cutscene. As you can see straight away, the strong suit of this game is quite clearly the visual artistic design. It looks pretty stunning, and I would say this is probably what people were looking for from the PS3. The character models remind me just a little bit of the Koei Tecmo Dynasty Warrior games. I don't know whether that's just me, but beautifully finished. You see that and your expectations will be pretty high, I reckon. And just a reminder that I can only show you footage in 720p, not in full HD. So here we are, start of the game. And loading screens are not too bad. There is a brief historical introduction which I've already cut back. It connects to the previous game, to the events. A shadowy power. They always are shadowy, aren't they? The game really does try to make the most of its beautiful cutscenes, and you will see that as we go through the prologue. So here's our first hero, and I can say straight away that I enjoyed playing as Yoshitsune. He is fast and has some nice moves. And we can see this is now where the action will begin. So everything is on fire at Suzaku Gate. So it's time now to slaughter some enemies. The deep red background I find is visually not terribly helpful, especially for an introductory session. But anyway, I cleared it, and there appears a semi-transparent treasure chest. And having a new blade is obviously a good thing. And we learn that we can switch between various weapons, so that should make combat more interesting. Yep, we can climb and jump. And there's a save point that also restores health. Off into the courtyard, more enemies. Yep, it's time to hack and slash. They don't appear to be terribly difficult, and you absolutely have to clear out everything. You can't leave one of them standing. And this is a bit more tricky, and again, it's a cutscene. So this is obviously the big special attack or skill. That's what it looks like. But they are QTEs, aren't they? They're a staple of that particular time. One I could well do without. Lots and lots of very small cutscenes are interpolated, obviously to make it more interesting, because otherwise you're just running around hacking and slashing and jumping and, generally doing your stuff. But it can, of course, get repetitive very quickly, especially with action areas being small and confined. There is little room for exploration. He's obviously very powerful, and he puts the seal on the gate, which means you can't get through. And this is as far as we can go here, so we now cut to the next warrior being introduced and learn his moves. He's obviously the big guy with the big stick, and I found him actually not as good to use as the first one, Yoshitsune, because you get this delay and this slowness in his movements. But we have another little cutscene, and this is actually an entertaining one.
何やつ
人だったのか。そのようなところにぼーっと突っ立っておるから。大きな岩かと。
She's being cheeky. She looks very fetching.
降りてこいこの末。
できぬ。文句があるなら登ってくればよい。
So it's wallop time. Get rid of enemies. Not an awful lot there, but he can kick objects. Well, that's exciting. I'm not quite sure why we're supposed to push this wagon. You can only push it that far. But there are more enemies. Wallop time. And I think you pick up these orbs, but I can't quite remember. We finish them off, so we get a treasure chest. And this is an important one because it can remove the seals. So the game does keep you moving along. Oh, don't go at each other. You're allies. They recognize each other. So this is the important thing, being able to switch between your heroes. So let's just try that out, and there we are, quite a quick flash, and I'm back with Yoshitsune. And now we find out what the point is of the cart pushing. We got to push it all the way back to a door so that I can jump onto the cart and over the door. Push, one more push. That's it. Switch over to Yoshitsune, and it tells us we can wall jump. Here we go, finally. I managed to clamber on the cart and jump over the door, which cannot be opened yet. So obviously another wave of enemies. And if there is one thing I really don't like, it's a camera that forces me to run towards it because you cannot control the camera with the right stick. The camera is semi-fixed. The right stick only allows you to do a sort of evasion backflip jump. And here she is again, our mysterious lady. And more carnage ensues. Switch to Benkei. I think he'll be better in this situation. It's nice how the spear carriers wait obligingly. And look at that. Finally, I've managed to get one of these essences. There's more running towards the camera, and this time I'm sort of stuck in combat in a corner area of the road, and you see how the camera, each time I cross over in the corner, the camera switches over, and it can be really quite disorientating. Well, for me anyway. I found the camera a bit annoying. But that must have been the last enemy. The barrier's dispersed. And we can now get into the treasure vault. Naturally, they do not like us coming into the treasure vault. So, yep, you guessed it. More enemies to mow down. And Benkei is doing a fine job, but his health is getting a bit low. So I decide to switch over to Yoshitsune. And there we are. We've got our treasure chest. And another stone. Just checking the map, and I think I need to backtrack because there's no other way out of here. And I figured out that I can use the boxes to get over back to the cart area. I probably should have opened up some other door somewhere, but I haven't found it. So back the same way I came. And here is the seal, finally. There she is again.
You really should learn when to give in. Still, if you're that keen for a fight, I should be able to arrange one.
Oh, she's so condescending. And this is going to be nasty. Yep, there's a guy with special powers, and this is not going to be an easy fight. So they're all infused with that power now. And these guys mean business. So I got to be careful. I might need Benkei here, yeah. Fortunately, the AI for enemies is not particularly sophisticated. They do hang back a bit, which helps people like me who haven't got the best reflexes for fighting. Whirling around is actually a lot of fun, you know. What have we got here? A Mashugane. So that's obviously an important fragment to have. Oh yes, I do like upgrading my weapons. That's really what I enjoy. Let's have a look at the treasure chest. And I sometimes wonder what's that light there? That is, has he picked up an orb or something? I honestly, this isn't clear to me at all. If you do know, let me know. So I'd like to equip that new club, but I've got no chance because there's a new scene. And we're getting our third warrior, Shizuka. I found her skill to be a bit tricky to get a handle on, so I was still using Yoshitsune as much as possible, really. But I think I've shown you enough by now for you to have a good impression and for me to summarize how I see Genji as a launch game. So that's it. What are your impressions from what you've seen? Is this a game you would still like to play today, 15 years after its release? Now, the critics once again did not take kindly to this game. I picked up comments like, it was a horribly stunted affair that suffered from poor camera angles, lackluster combat, and a general lack of anything remotely resembling something innovative. Oh dear, I do agree with the poor camera angles. And the combat, it's not bad, but it's pretty clunky at times. Sony's 2006 E3 conference is infamous for many reasons, but one of the primary sources of ridicule was the demo of Genji Days of the Blade, which famously featured a giant enemy crab in historical battles which, quote, actually took place in ancient Japan. Yeah, someone might have overlooked the giant crab factor there. For better or worse, this is the game's legacy. Infamous for a meme, while few seem to know much about the quality of the game itself. So yes, this is a bit of a sad story, really. A game that probably could have been so much better. I don't know about you, but I always feel that console launches are really terrible things for game developers, because inevitably there are some, especially of course the first-party developers or close third-party ones, who are being chivied and pressurized to produce something flashy and glamorous for the launch, and I would say there's a lot of crunch probably happening at those times. So getting something ready for a new platform where the developers are still getting their head around how it all works technically and how to optimize for the architecture, it strikes me as a really, really tricky business at the best of times. Even Nintendo sometimes struggles, but they always manage to pull the rabbit out of the hat, like Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Switch release. You need something like that. Sony clearly didn't pull it off for the PlayStation 3. And after that, it was a long and dour struggle to get good games and games that caught the public's attention onto the PlayStation 3. It took many years. You can probably say the PS3 struggled throughout its lifetime. I think in the end it did end up with a pretty decent library, and one that I really enjoy collecting for. I still just occasionally get a game to bolster my collection, but I'm pretty much finished. So I'll just show you what my collection looks like on paper, because this is something that viewers and subscribers have asked me, how I keep track of my collection, what I do. Do I use special software? Which software do I recommend? I don't recommend any software at all. I have tried a few years ago. I'm a pretty simple person. I don't want to spend hours inputting into a pretty complex database all sorts of stuff. I like things to be straightforward, streamlined, simple. It's got to be quick, I want to spend my time gaming, not administering a database of titles. Now, I know there is new and more sophisticated software out these days. By all means, do try it out. If you are based in North America, it's probably easier. You can nowadays scan title information in, etc. For someone like me in Region 4, that's where things fell down pretty quickly. Some of the titles I had or the details were simply not recognized by the software because they incorporate a database mainly for the main markets, and the dominant one is North America, and if you're lucky, Europe, PAL regions might be included as well. But Region 4, we drop off the world map. So it wasn't really that helpful for me. In the end, I decided to simply keep my information on Google Sheets because I used Google Documents a fair bit. It's a straightforward and easy solution. I don't like buying big office software and all that stuff. I don't need it. So I just use Google Sheets, and that's all I need. I don't have a huge commercial collection. I'm not even a professional collector. If you're a hobby collector, don't spend too much money or hours and hours on something that is not really necessary, would be my advice. By all means, have a look at it. There are also online services. I know a lot of people like the what they call backloggery and similar types of services. And some of them I see you have to pay for now on a monthly basis. And have a look if you already have some software, even if it's old one, it doesn't matter. What do you need to know? Do you need to have a picture in your database of the game? I don't need one. I just need the title, maybe the year it was published, the region, the age rating I always put in. For me, that's significant. Additional information like, is it part of a collector's edition? Are there any bonuses that came with it? Anything special? Maybe a note about where I bought it, if it's second hand, from eBay, etc. If there is a flaw or fault with the game, especially second hand ones, crack in the case, or the cover has maybe had some water damage, things like that I do note. But that's really, really easy to do on a very simple spreadsheet like the Google Sheets provides. And I'll just show you that this is all I have, is as simple as it gets, So that's my PS3 collection. Titles start with 3D Dot Game Heroes and go down to number 180, the Zone of the Enders. And then, you go sideways on the spreadsheet, and I have about the region, what edition it is, condition. The sheet provides you with ready-made columns, and it's easy to input information. There's only one tiny twist with keeping any kind of database of your collection. And that applies whether you use a simple software like Google Sheets or a fancy one. You have to remember to input the title when you get a new acquisition. Yes, if you forget, and then months later you look and you say, oh no, I haven't got that title, oh dear oh me, I must go out and find it and buy it. And then you buy a second copy. Now that's a very special little mistake to make, so keep that in mind, please. And it has happened to me on a few occasions. Whatever else you do, the moment that game arrives in the mail or you pick it up in a shop, you enter it in your database. Keep it up to date. That's really important. You see, there's some really, really significant advice here for you. So to reiterate what I talked about in the beginning, I wrote, never ever look back on a purchase with regret, letting it eat away at you. It will stop you making good purchases in the future. If you can take that away with you, then I think that's actually something that might prove helpful, I hope. What have we learned today from looking at the PS3 launch games? I would say the main thing to take away is that just because it's a launch game and just because it's an exclusive does not necessarily mean it will be successful and will be prized in the future as a collector's item. None of these three games fall into that category, generally speaking. However, they are collector's items to me personally, because I value having them in my collection. They show me something about how the PS3 started out, and I can then look back and follow the whole history through with the games that were released throughout the life cycle. To me, that's a value that I can't put a monetary price on. If you do want to check the monetary value of your games, I will just show you very quickly what I use, and that is the website Price Charting. And as far as I'm aware, practically every other collector uses it, I think. So I found it the most useful one. You need to be aware that it's North American based, so you're getting the value in US dollars. I expect that most of the database input they get from all the hundreds of thousands of sales happening are from the North American continent. So here we have Genji Days of the Blade listed. The two versions, the PAL version and the NA version. As usual, the NA version is valued slightly higher. If we have a look at the pricing, it tells us that the average price for a complete copy is around $10. So that's what they call CIB, complete in box, as your games always should be when you're a collector. Having a loose disc or cartridge clattering around is simply a no-no, at least in my book. I think most collectors would agree with that. You may not get around that problem with much older games, but there really is no excuse for a PS3 game or most other more recent platforms for there not to be a case and the art cover and a manual if it was printed. So price charting will then show you all the recent instances of sales that happened, and there is obviously quite a range. People bought it from anywhere between maybe a couple of dollars up to, I see, $15 might have been the highest. Now price charting, I think, tends to reflect values at the lower end. I don't know where people find games, even in the US or Canada, at these prices. It must be just local game stores they happen to walk into, and there's a copy of Genji for maybe $2.50, I don't know. Just be aware of that and don't be discouraged if you see prices in your own locality in either stores that you walk into or even online on maybe local trading sites that the prices are different and I expect somewhat higher. That's just how it goes, and at least in my experience, because I'm not located in North America, it's kind of difficult for me to assess that. But that's what it looks like to me. Now, if you go onto eBay, the picture will probably look very different. So quickly checking eBay for Genji Days of the Blade, there seem to be plenty of copies around, and that is always significant, of course, for the price, and we'll be talking more about that in the future. As is common on eBay, prices can vary quite a lot, and a sealed copy will always fetch more, obviously, than a pre-owned second-hand copy. But you should be able to pick up a copy for around $10. You might want to spend a bit more if you want to get one in really pristine condition. For me, those are the two poles I look at. I look at price charting, and that gives me the minimum level of pricing. And then I look at eBay, and that's more the top end, really. You could also throw in sites like Amazon, which have an extensive second-hand marketplace, where prices, in my experience, and I have bought there before, tend to be on the somewhat higher side. Depending on how you purchase games, whether you need to buy them mainly online, as I do because of my location and situation, or whether you have access to many gaming stores in your town or region and can go in and find a bargain. Now, to me, that always sounds like so much fun, being able to rummage around a shop and actually finding something, or going to a garage sale and finding a maybe rare video game. I can only dream of those things, but you may be able to do it, and that's part of the fun of collecting. But in very general terms, that gives you a rough indication of the pricing you're looking at. Is it worthwhile collecting for the PS3? I'm obviously biased. I'm predisposed to say yes, because I have done it since 2013, and I have enjoyed it, and I, to this day, enjoy the library I have. I do regularly play my PS3 games, and I think that's really important. We had a bit of a blip last year when Sony announced they were going to close both the PS3 and PS Vita online stores. That caused quite a shock reaction, and as you're probably aware, Sony retracted that decision. Fortunately, because in the short time span between announcing it and then withdrawing the announcement, prices for both Vita games and PS3 games started really jumping up, and that's when we suddenly saw which games were actually pretty rare and therefore suddenly considered desirable, because once you can't buy them digitally online anymore, there's no other option but the physical copy. So certain games attracted a lot of attention. Fortunately, from my own observation, the spike in price rises for PS3 titles started coming down again quite quickly and has almost normalized again. So you should still be able to put together a pretty nice PS3 library without having to break the bank, at least not for most of the titles. So that is something I want to look at in my next PS3 video, and that is the exclusives, PlayStation 3 exclusives, because those would naturally be more desirable and therefore might attract a higher price and be considered more valuable. And there are certain games amongst those exclusives which, for whatever reason, received a very small print run, and scarcity breeds high prices. I have just a few of those, not many, just a few. We'll be looking at those next time. There's some really fascinating stuff there. Until then, thank you very much, as always, for listening to my ramblings in this rather hodgepodge video today. But at least we got the launch titles out of the way and can dive into the more interesting stuff next time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.